Hey hey hey. Hello ladies and gentlemen, hello lovers of the world of Blenderism. I am glad to welcome you to another episode, in which I will show you how to go from the first image from the viewport, to the second image of the render, and then to the third image in Photoshop. And so if you switch to viewport mode, then the scene in general looks like this. I can hide the cube with fog so that the car is visible. Well, let's start to analyze in turn what does my scene consist of. First of all, I want to show you how I created the mountain. I add landscape to the scene, and in the small menu on the left we have the ability to control the object. There are a lot of settings and options to control the landscape. Well, this is a topic for a separate lesson. I'll just show you what settings I used. I raised the height a little since the appearance suits me and increased the mesh resolution to 512 by 512 faces. In the Landscape Tools tab I click Landscape Eroder. It gives us the ability to apply various kinds of erosion to a square ANT landscape grid. So if we go to Awake Paint mode, then in the menu on the right we see a list of erosion options that we can apply to our mesh. In this case, capacity suits me. We also have the ability to apply weight to the surface of the mountain using a brush. If we reduce the force of the brush and with smooth, light movements we apply brains to the top of the mountain in those places where there should be snow. If you spend more time on this, then of course you can do it more carefully, but for understanding this is enough. Now switch to Vertex Paint mode and press Vertex Color from Weight. To say it simply, we have created a map of how the snow will be located on the mountain. And so we add a new material and press Ctrl-Shift-T at the moment when we point to the Principled BSDF. You can download the stone material on Ambient CG for free. This gives us the opportunity to select several elements at once for connection. And so the Blender connects all the elements of the material instead of us. You just need to check that everything is correct. And so we added the stone material. Now we need snow. Copy the node Principled BSDF and drag it down and press Ctrl-Shift-T again in order to select the elements for connection again. Well, so we added two materials, now we need to combine them correctly. The Node Mix shader will help us with this. We connect the stone material to the upper slot to the snow material in the lower slot. And to control the spread of snow, we connect the attribute node as a factor. Now we need to write in the name line exactly the name that is written in the color attribute. You can simply copy it. Now if we go to the image material mode, we get this result. This is because our mountain does not have a UV map. So we go into the editing mode, press the U button and select Smart UV Project. Whoosh, and our mountain looks much better, but that's not all. We go back to the shader and add color ramp after the attribute node. This gives us the ability to clearly control the spread of snow. Now, using the sliders, we configure the desired result. I was satisfied with the one you see on the screen. Now let's see how I made the water at the foot of the mountain. First, I added a plane. I applied the ocean modifier to it. And to achieve the desired look, you need to set the following settings. I set the water quality in the viewport to 15 and the render to 24. I reduced the ocean to 0.4 since 1 is too much. You also need to set the wave height. I used 0.07. And I set the water type in the ocean to shallow water. I did not include foam, because it seems to me that this would be unnecessary, especially since as far as I know, the water in the mountains is not salty. I also used the subdivision modifier with a resolution of 1. The material that I used for water I downloaded in Blender Kit. I use it all the time. It is called water depth, because it has the ability to control the shape and size of the water and control the darkness of the water. And if you switch to the render view, then the water looks like this. I added objects to the scene from my asset library. I added objects such as grass and tulips. There is no need to stick a lot of them, only where they fall into the frame. On this side, near the water, I put this set of stones with moss. In front of the car further down the road I installed a coniferous tree so that the sun would shine from behind this tree. In this case I used a library called Asset Plant Library, which you can see in the list. I have more than one. I recommend everyone to decide on the theme for which you need libraries. They do not take up a little space on the disk, so I recommend everyone to stock up on the most necessary libraries, whether it is a library of materials or objects. I also used a ready-made road that I downloaded into the Kit Blender. Nothing complicated. I wrote the word road in the search bar. I put a tick opposite free and downloaded this one. If you go into editing mode, then below the road there is a curve with which you can move the vertices left to right or up and down, and the road will repeat the movement behind the curve. As usual, to create volume in the image I use a very small amount of fog. I added using a cube with the principal volume material, in which I set the fog density to 0.15 and connect it to volume. I also want to show you the world settings. In the shader I built such a node system. In a nutshell, I used two suns with slightly different settings. One of them is smaller and is located next to each other by a couple of degrees. This is to create soft shadows. And I used an HDRI map mostly to create a blue sky, that is, you can choose any suitable one with a blue sky. And mixed them together using mix color, the factor of which I set to 0.7. Next are the settings for the cycles render. I render using the video card. Noise threshold I set to 0.03, amount of samples 160. Noise reduction using the video card. I disable the reflective checkboxes in the light path bookmarks. Since I used the downloaded materials and I got a fairly loaded scene, I checked the simplify checkbox. In color management I set it to filmic and high contrast. Next, the compression is set to 10%, I set the color depth to 16 bits. I set the image size to 2K and 200% so that the photo turns out to be high quality. Now in the layers, I remove the checkmark from the combined one and set the checkboxes opposite all the layers that you see. Next, in the World tab, there are world settings and sampling should be set to manual. This greatly speeds up the rendering process. Now in the Composer you can see such a system of nodes. If I explain it in simple terms, then in layers we divided the image into 14 layers. Now we denoise each of these layers separately. And with the help of mix color in multiplay mode we multiply them and then add with the help of mix color in add mode. And as a result we get a high quality image. But it is not so good to be considered complete. You can still work on it in Photoshop. This is called post-processing. So we open our images in Photoshop and press Ctrl J to make a copy of the layer. This gives us the opportunity to always roll back to the beginning. The next step we need to select the car. The object selection tool will help us with this. But it does not work perfectly. Therefore, it is necessary to select the lasso and refine the selection. With the Shift key pressed and the left mouse button pressed, we add to the selection, and with the Alt key pressed and the left mouse button, we remove from the selection. The more accurately we select the car, the less work there will be with mask adjustments. And on the other hand, if something is not accurately selected, you can always correct it with a mask. When the selection is ready, press Ctrl J to create a new layer and add a mask to it. Now, with Ctrl held down, click on the new layer with the car and invert the selection. Select the mask and press Alt-Tab to fill everything that is not the car with black. We did this for the future, since we will now blur the bottom layer. And if we need to, we can always correct the mask. I select the second layer and go to the filter, Blur Gallery, blur the contour. Now I stretch the arrow along the road, and the speed can be set to approximately 30%. OK. Now select the layer with the car and go to the filter, blur gallery, radial blur. Now this circle needs to be reduced in diameter and placed opposite the wheel. Set the blur angle to 10 degrees, since I do not want a very powerful effect. These white dots can also be adjusted a little, they work in a similar way as the gradient. And such a radial blur gives us a visual imagination of the fact that the wheel is spinning, but at the same time we see the logo and spokes. The same procedure must be done with the front wheel. Next, create a color adjustment layer. In its settings, set the color to 53, and the saturation to 3. Next, add a levels adjustment layer. In its settings, set the mid-range to 90 and the light to 233. And the lower slider responsible for the dark colors is pulled a little closer to the center to lighten the photo. Now we can kind of fix the result by pressing Ctrl-Alt-Shift-E, and we need to copy this layer twice for future operations. Now we will make sunbeams. And so to begin with we turn off the top layer, while we will work with the second one. We go to the image, correction, threshold. By default it is 128 here and we leave it, press OK. Then we add a white mask to this layer and switch it to screen mode. The next step is to add a color tone saturation adjustment layer. We put a tick opposite toning. We set the color tone to 49, and the saturation to 38. So good. Now we go to the filter, blur, radial blur. We set it to 100, the blur method we set it to linear, and the quality to the best. Now we set the crosshair to the place from which we will emit rays. We can press OK. Now as we see the result is a little bright, right? It is necessary to lower the opacity. Now we turn on the first layer, go to image, correction, threshold. This time we set the value to 180. We add a white mask to this layer and switch it to screen mode. We also copy the adjustment layer color tone saturation, drag it up. Next we go to filter, blur, radial blur. And then just click OK. Now we just have to adjust the opacity, and so now let's try to control the spread of rays. We turn off the two upper layers. Select the mask of the fourth layer and select gradient from black to white. With this gradient we need to draw on the mask so that the rays come from the tree branches and end approximately in the middle of the car, maybe on the hood. At the same time, I want the rays to hit the tulips. Therefore, the gradient should go at an angle. Next, to refine this moment a little, we select a black brush and paint on the mountain. Since I don't want the rays to hit the mountain. To change the brush size, press Alt-right mouse button and drag to the sides. Well, in a similar way, we need to work with the mask of the second layer. I choose a black and white gradient and put it on the mask. It does not necessarily have to be the same as the previous one. And it may be even better if it is slightly different. Our goal is to choose a beautiful option. And also paint a black brush on the mountain so that there are no rays on it. When we are done with this, we add another adjustment layer of curves. We choose the linear contrast method and slightly increase the light colors. There is also a way to quickly make a white balance. Use an eyedropper to take a sample from the whitest color that is in the image. We put a new layer using this color and switch it to the divide mode. In this case, this method worked very poorly, since our image had a good balance. Also we can go to filter and then camera raw and adjust some settings there. That's all. Don't forget to check the subscription. If you liked this episode, then like and write comments. Learn hotkeys, they will make your life easier. Take your time, try different settings and pray for Ukraine. Thanks, bye.